and cried, and "Hey, you're a good girl. I have very good judgment about that." But Franny kept crying. "Hey, listen," said Junior Jones. "You know what? When someone touches you and you don't want to be touched, that's not really being touched. You gotta believe me. It's not you they touch when they touch you that way. They don't really get you, you understand. Still got you inside you. Nobody's touched you, not really. You're a really good girl. You believe me? You've still got you inside you. You believe that?" "I don't know," Franny whispered and went on crying. One of her arms walled down Junior's side, and I took her hand. She squeezed. I squeezed back. Harold Swallow, darting through the trees, guiding us like a hush up the path around the infirmary, and opened the door. "What's all this?" the night nurse said. "I'm Franny Berry," said my sister, "and I've been beaten up." Beaten up would remain Franny's euphemism for it, although everyone knew she had been raped. Beaten up was all Franny would admit to, although no one missed the point. This was a way it would never be a legal point, however. "She means she was raped," Junior Jones told Mrs. Butler, but Franny kept shaking her head. I think that her way of interpreting Junior's kindness to her and his version of how the her and her had not been touched was to convert her sexual abuse into the terms of a mere fight she had lost. She whispered to him. He held her against his chest and in his arms, and then he put her down on her feet and said to Mrs. Butler, "Okay, she was beaten up." Mrs. Butler knew what she meant. "She was beaten up and raped," said Harold Swallow, who couldn't stand still. But Junior Jones cooled him with a look and said to him, "Why don't you fly away, Harold? Why don't you fly off and find Mr. Dove?" That put a gleam back in Harold's eye, and he flew away. I called Father before I remembered there was no working phone in the Hotel New Hampshire. Then I called campus security, and I asked them to give Father the message. Franny and I were at the Dairy School Infirmary. Franny had been beaten up. "It's just another Halloween kid," Franny said, holding my hand. "The worst one, Franny," I said to her. "The worst one so far," she said. That's my passage. Yeah, I guess I'm done. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Kimber. That was excellent. And so if I could ask you, I don't think you said it, when did you first know about the book? Was this something that you read in high school? Just to kind of get an idea.
Yeah, I think I did read it in high school. I don't remember. They also have made a hilarious adaptation of a movie that John Irving's books are long, and all of them have their span, years and years worth of deep emotional lives of families, and he doesn't like adaptations so much because they condense the stories. So the Hotel New Hampshire, the director that did it, crammed almost every line of the book into the movie. It's this frenetically paced hilarity with really deep undertones. It's kind of a contradiction. And the character that I read is played by a very young Rob Lowe, and Jodie Foster is Franny. It's hilarious and disturbing all at the same time, the movie.
Excellent. So, okay, so you said that the reasons for censorship was, I'm sorry, just repeat it really fast.
So reasons for censorship are, sexual content. There's also a passage in the book where someone describes how to insert a diaphragm. There's lots of sex from younger men with older women. There are the taxidermy dog that ends up I don't want to spoil the book for anyone that actually wants to go read it, but Sorrow floats. The taxidermy dog ends up floating in one of the scenes. There's a lot of just really raw emotion, real emotion that is off-putting to a lot of people.
Okay. All right. And was there any place that it was specifically banned for those reasons, or it was just a general ban, or it was just listed as banned? Go ahead.
There were a couple high schools in New Hampshire that challenged it, and the librarians put it back on the shelf, and another one in Vermont, a high school in Vermont.
Okay. And just really quickly before we let you go, or ask anyone if they have questions for you, do you, having read the book and kind of seeing, you know, what they thought about it and why it was challenged, do you agree with some of their point of view? I mean, not in terms of banning it, but, you know, do you think that it's inappropriate for this grade level, or, you know, what do you think about the banning?
I don't think that it's, I read it at a young age, but I read everything at a young age, and I'm very lucky to have had the opportunity to have parents and librarians and everyone else support the, you know, I was reading at a 12th grade reading level in 3rd grade, and the choices of what I had in the classroom were, you know, I'd read them all. So books like this, I think it's not inappropriate. There are some things that are, you know, complex and more advanced, but I don't think it's inappropriate.
Thank you, Kimber. Are there any questions for Kimber before we move on? And if you do think of something, we'll have a chance at the end for people to kind of, you know, ask questions or just kind of give something general, not necessarily for a specific book. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Thank you again, Kimber.
Thank you.
And let's see, the next person, oh, go ahead and click off the talk button, Kimber.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so let's see. The next person is going to be Christina, and she's going to be reading for us A Catcher in the Rye. And of course, I picked the reddest book possible. So, Christina, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you. So once again, just for everybody who kind of popped in as Kimber was reading, go ahead and give your name, talk a little bit about the book and why it was censored, banned, and if you want to give an example of where and why it was banned, that's great. And then do your reading. Okay? Christina.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? All right. Great. So the book that I chose is The Catcher in the Rye, and it is one of my most favorite books, and it is also one of the most frequently banned and challenged books. And I found actually a really short article that Time posted in 2008, and it gives a really good summary. So I'm just going to kind of go over the basics from it. I'm going to assume that everyone has read The Catcher in the Rye. I know in a lot of schools it's required reading. That's where I first read it. It was required reading in my 11th grade English class. But it's about a boy who's kicked out of a series of distinguished private schools, and he's really sarcastic and jaded and just pissed off at the world. And it just kind of goes over, I don't know, a few days after he's kicked out of school and just trying to figure out himself kind of, and I guess what to do with his life. So it was an English teacher in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is actually where I live right now, was fired in 1960 for assigning The Catcher in the Rye to an 11th grade English class. And in Columbus, Ohio, a community deemed the book anti-white. And they formed a delegation to have it banned from local schools. Another library banned it for excess vulgar language, sexual themes, things concerning moral issues, excessive violence, and anything dealing with the occult. And it does have all of those things, but I don't know that it's out of bounds for a 16-year-old boy. It's kind of like the language and the way he postures himself as an adult feels appropriate for a 16-year-old boy. And I thought this was really interesting. Apparently, the book introduced the slang expression "screw up," like to screw up something. I thought that was really interesting. And before I read my little section, I wanted to share this quotation by J.D. Salinger. He said, "Some of my best friends are children. In fact, all my best friends are children. It's almost unbearable for me to realize that my book will be kept on a shelf out of their reach." And I just thought that was really great. So anyway, my section that I'm going to read is from, it's right when Holden is kicked out of school, and it's when he's getting ready to leave. And he walks in his room, and he's kind of trying to get attention from his friend, or Ackley, a boy that he hates but also likes, I think. Anyway, he goes in his room to wake him up, and he says, "Hey, Ackley." He still didn't hear me. He slept like a rock. "Hey, Ackley." He heard that all right. "What the hell's the matter with you?" he said. "I was asleep, for Christ's sake." "Listen, what's the routine on joining a monastery?" I asked him. I was sort of toying with the idea of joining one. "Do you have to be a Catholic and all?" "Certainly you have to be a Catholic, you bastard. Did you wake me up just to ask me a dumb question? Go back to sleep. I'm not going to join one anyway. The kind of luck I have, I'd totally join one with all the wrong kind of monks in it. All stupid bastards, or just bastards." When I said that, old Ackley sat way the hell up in bed. "Listen," he said, "I don't care what you say about me or anything, but if you start making cracks about my goddamn religion, for Christ's sake." "Relax," I said. "Nobody's making any cracks about your goddamn religion." I got up off Eli's bed and started towards the door. I didn't want to hang around in that stupid atmosphere anymore. I stopped on the way, though, and picked up Ackley's hand and gave him a big, phony handshake. He pulled it away from me. "What's the idea?" he said. "No idea. I just want to thank you for being such a goddamn prince, that's all," I said. I said it in this very sincere voice. "You're aces, Ackley, kid," I said. "You know that? Wise guy. Someday somebody's going to bash your..." I didn't even bother to listen to him. I shut the damn door and went out into the corridor. Everybody was asleep or out or home for the weekend, and it was very, very quiet and depressing in the corridor. There was this empty box of Colonel's toothpaste outside Lady and Hoffman's door, and while I walked down towards the stairs, I kept giving it a boot with the sheep-lined slipper I had home. What I thought I'd do, I thought I might go down and see what old Mal Broussard was doing. But all of a sudden, I changed my mind. All of a sudden, I decided what I'd really do. I'd get the hell out of Quincy. Right, that thing, that and all. I mean, not wait till Wednesday or anything. I just didn't want to hang around anymore. It made me too sad and lonesome. So what I decided to do, I decided I'd take a room in a hotel in New York, some very inexpensive hotel and all, and just take it easy till Wednesday. Then, on Wednesday, I'd go home all rested up and feeling swell. I figured my parents probably wouldn't get old Thurmer's letter saying I'd been given the axe, till maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. I didn't want to go home or anything till they got through it and thoroughly digested it and all. I didn't want to be around when they first got it. My mother gets very hysterical. She's not too bad after she gets something thoroughly digested, though. Besides, I sort of needed a little vacation. My nerves were shot. They really were. Anyways, that's what I decided I'd do. So I went back to the room and turned on the light to start packing and all. I already had quite a few things packed. Old Stradlater didn't even wake up. I lit a cigarette and got all dressed, and I packed these 2 Gladstones I had. It only took me about 2 minutes. I'm a very rapid packer. One thing about packing depressed me a little. I had to pack these brand new ice skates my mother had practically just sent me a couple days before. That depressed me. I could see my mother going in Spalding's and asking the salesman a million dopey questions. And here I was getting the axe again. It made me feel pretty sad. She bought me the wrong kind of skates. I wanted racing skates, and she bought hockey, but it made me sad anyway. Almost every time somebody gives me a present, it ends up making me sad. After I got all packed, I started counting my dough. I don't remember exactly how much I had, but I was pretty loaded. My grandmother had just sent me a wad about a week before. I have this grandmother that's quite lavish with her dough. She doesn't have all her marbles anymore. She's old as hell, and she keeps sending me money for my birthday about 4 times a year. Anyway, even though I was pretty loaded, I figured I could use a few extra bucks. You never know. So what I did was I went down the hall and woke up Frederick Woodruff, this guy I lent my typewriter to. I asked him how much he'd give me for it. He was a pretty wealthy guy. He said he didn't know. He said he didn't much want to buy it. Finally, he bought it, though. It cost about 90 bucks, and all he bought it for was 20. He was sore because I'd woke him up. When I was all set to go, when I had my badge and all, I stood for a while next to the stairs and took a last look down the goddamn corridor. I was sort of crying. I don't know why. I put my red hunting hat on and turned the peak around to the back, the way I like it, and then I yelled to the top of my goddamn voice, "Sleep tight, you moron." I bet I woke up every bastard on the whole floor. Then I got the hell out. Some stupid guy throwing peanut shells all over the stairs, and I damn near broke my crazy neck. Alright, that's my contribution. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. So, yeah, this is a great book. It's a perennial addition on the list. It's consistently, you know, all 3, banned, challenged, censored, the whole thing. Just to kind of let you guys see, there was also an incredible film made. Oh, I'm sorry. I got the wrong thing here. I think there was like a independent film of Catcher in the Rye, and I was trying to get the picture of it, but I guess I couldn't. I'll pop it on here if I get a chance. But this is considered one of the books that really got into the heads of young people, and I think it came out at a time where people really weren't interested in knowing what young people thought, because I think having been young themselves, they knew that mostly young people thought about sex and violence and how people were phonies and things like that. So anyone have a question about this book or why it was challenged? Any questions for Christina? Okay, Christy. Oh, go right ahead, Perlita.
Thanks, Lori. I may have missed this, but I was just wondering when Christina first read the book.
I first read the book when I was in high school. It was assigned reading for my 11th grade English class.
And Christina, do you, once again, you were kind of giving us why it was, and you guys have an answer ready because I'm going to ask you all the same thing. Do you sort of agree with some of the reasons why there were concerns about the book or people were angry about the book? What are your insights on that?
I think the challenges were very unwarranted. I mentioned this earlier, but he does, I mean, I guess they're right, he does swear and he does talk about sex, but it felt appropriate for a 16-year-old boy. He was putting on I don't know, he was exhibiting showmanship. He was putting on a facade that he was tough and older and didn't care. And so it felt appropriate. I don't think, and what happened to him in the end, I felt like proved that all his tough guy posturing was, I don't know, was bad, I guess. So I felt like it had all of those elements that people have problems with. I feel like they all have a purpose in this book. They aren't just gratuitous language and gratuitous sex scenes just for the purpose of, and there aren't even sex scenes, just mentions of sex. But they're not there just to be there. They're there for a greater purpose. And so I do not think that the challenges are warranted.
Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else before we move on? Okay, so we are now in moving on to our next person, and that's going to be Eddie Hamlin. Eddie is going to talk about looking for Alaska. So let me go ahead and put this up. This is by John Green. Okay. Eddie, you ready? Or, I'm sorry, are you set to go?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay, I leave it to you. Everyone, Eddie is going to talk about looking for Alaska.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eddie Hamlin. I'm going to be reading from Looking for Alaska. I have a confession first, is that I'm not a really big fiction reader. I'm more of a nonfiction reader. But my teenage daughter shoved this in my face recently and said, you need to read this. And so I started reading it. I'm not quite finished with the book, but so far I've really been enjoying it. John Green is an excellent writer. This book has won many awards, and I can see why. But it's also been banned and challenged because of the content in it, which has drugs, alcohol, smoking. It's sexually explicit, and it's considered to be unsuited for the age group, and it's designed for high school students, 9th grade and up. I did a little research on some of the reasons why it's been banned. It's mostly been from parents wanting it out of school libraries because they're saying it's inappropriate for the things I had listed. But one of the most interesting things I found was the Tennessee government back in 2012 was challenging the book because they saw it as a gateway to sexual activity. Like high school students need a book for a gateway to sexual activity. But anyhow, a little bit about the book. One of the main characters, Alaska Young, is the heroine of the story. And Miles Halter is one of her friends. He moves from his state to a boarding school in Birmingham, Alabama. And his other friend is Chip. And so Alaska and Chip teach Miles how to drink, smoke, and plot elaborate pranks. The novel is set up with days before and days after Alaska's passing, and there's some question of whether or not it was a suicide or not. The ending is a little ambiguous. So I'm going to start reading from 8 days before. 8 days before. Alaska walked in on the first day back from Christmas break and sat beside the Colonel on the couch. The Colonel was hard at work, breaking a land speed record on the PlayStation. She didn't say she missed us or that she was glad to see us. She just looked at the couch and said, "You really need a new couch? Please don't address me when I'm racing," the Colonel said. "God, does Jeff Gordon have to put up with this shit?" "I've got an idea," she said. "It's great. What we need is a pre-prank that coincides with an attack on Kevin and his minions," she said. I was sitting on the bed, reading the textbook in preparation for my American history exam the next day. "A pre-prank?" I asked. "A prank designed to lull the administration into a false sense of security," the Colonel answered, annoyed by the distraction. "After the pre-prank, the Eagle will think the junior class has done its prank and won't be waiting for it when it actually comes. Every year, the junior and senior classes pull off a prank at some point in the year. Usually something lame, like Roman candles in the dorm circle at 5 in the morning on a Sunday." "Is there always a pre-prank?" I asked. "No, you idiot," the Colonel said. "If there was always a pre-prank, then the Eagle would expect 2 pranks. The last time a pre-prank was used, 1987. When the pre-prank was cutting off electricity at the campus, and then the actual prank was putting 500 live crickets in the heating ducts of the classrooms. Sometimes you can still hear the chirping. Your rote memorization is like so impressive, I said. You guys are like an old married couple, Alaska smiled in a creepy way. You don't know the half of it, the colonel said. You should see this kid try to crawl into bed with me at night. Hey, let's get on the subject, Alaska said. Pre-prank, this weekend since there's a new moon. We're staying at the barn. You, me, the colonel, Takyami, and a special gift to you, Pug, Laura Buttersky. The Laura Buttersky I puked on? She's just shy. She still likes you, Alaska laughed. Puking made you look vulnerable. Very perky boobs, the colonel said. Are you bringing Takyami for me? You need to be single for a while. True enough, the colonel said. He just spent a few more months playing video games, she said. That hand-eye coordination will come in handy when you get to third base. Gosh, I haven't heard the base system in so long. I think I've forgotten third base, the colonel responded. I would roll my eyes at you, but I can't afford to look away from the screen. French, feel, finger, fuck. It's like you skipped third grade, Alaska said. I did skip third grade, the colonel answered. So I said, what's our pre-prank? The colonel and I worked that out. No need to get into trouble yet. Oh, okay. I'm going to go for a cigarette then. I left. It wasn't the first time Alaska had left me out of the loop, certainly, but after we've been together so much over Thanksgiving, it seemed ridiculous to plan the pre-prank with the colonel, but without me, whose T-shirts were wet with her tears, mine, who listened to her read Vatican, me, who'd been the butt of the world's worst knock-knock joke, me. I walked to the Sunday convenience kiosk across from the school and smoked. This never happened to me in Florida. This oh-so-high school angst about who likes whom more, and I hated myself for letting it happen now. You don't have to care about her, I told myself. Screw her. 4 days before. The colonel wouldn't tell me a word about the pre-prank, except that it was to be called barn night, and that when I packed, I should pack for 2 days. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday were torture. The colonel was always with Alaska, and I was never invited. So I spent an inordinate amount of time studying for finals, which helped my GPA considerably, and I finally finished my religion paper. My answer to the question was straightforward enough, really. Most Christians and Muslims believe in a heaven and a hell, though there's not a lot of disagreement within both religions over what exactly you will get into, one afterlife or the other. Buddhists are more complicated because of the Buddhist doctrine of anatta, which basically says that people don't have eternal souls. Instead, they have a bundle of energy, and that bundle of energy is transitory, migrating from one body to another, reincarnating endlessly until it eventually reaches enlightenment. I never liked writing concluding paragraphs to papers where you just repeat what you've already said with phrases like in summation and to conclude. I didn't do that. Instead, I talked about why I thought it was an important question. People I thought wanted security. They couldn't bear the idea of death being a big black nothing, couldn't bear the thought of their loved ones not existing, and couldn't even imagine themselves not existing. I finally decided that people believe in an afterlife because they couldn't bear not to. And that ends my passage.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a great reading. You have a great voice. Thank you so much. So does anyone have a question for Mr. Hamlin? Go right ahead, Perlita.
Oh, it's more of a comment. Eddie, you have to read The Fault in Our Stars next. You just have to.
I know my daughter has all of John Green's books. So Christmas time, Christmas break.
Yes, his books seem to get challenged as they come out. So, and as you can see, I just went ahead and put here that there is, the book has been adapted for the screen, and we should be looking for that to come out soon. This looks quite a ways away, but you know how that goes. His writing style just seems to be really gritty, and it's interesting that it came right after Christina read Catcher in the Rye, because I kind of think it had that feel to it. Or maybe it was just me, I don't know. So let's see. Anyone else before we move on? Oh, and before we do move on, Eddie, like I said, what do you think about the challenges to the book, you know, in terms of your own personal opinion?
Well, from my perspective, I really think it accurately reflects high school reality. My high school years were probably much raunchier than this, but I think it accurately portrays my daughter just graduated from high school, and talking to some of her friends and her, I can see that this is more, I see this more as a mirror reflecting reality, and I think there are some people out there just can't deal with reality, and so they don't want to see it in print, and so that's the cause of the challenges.
Well, that's interesting that you should say that, and especially since you have sort of the perspective of a parent. Can you give us a little insight as to maybe why? I mean, I'm just assuming that you talk to other parents, or you maybe overhear some of the things that they say. Do you have any idea why it is so difficult for parents, even in the high school grades, to kind of allow their children to read books that are, you know, very realistic, and even, you know, have themes that as young adults maybe they should be beginning to learn about, but, you know, parents kind of don't want them to know? Do you have like any idea about that?
Well, sometimes I think it's because of either their upbringing or the moral standards that they believe in, which is fine for them, but I think that you shouldn't be applying your moral system to all of society. It's like, it's fine if you have your moral codes and your ethics that you follow, as long as you're not harming anyone. And I don't see these books, or any of these banned books, for a matter of fact. As I was going through the list, I saw there's quite a few greats on here that are classics and award-winning books. And it's like, if you don't like the book, nobody's forcing you to read the book. You can always opt out of not reading the book if you're a student. I'm an elementary school teacher in my other life, so I know a little bit about the high school levels, and if something is offensive to your beliefs, you can always opt out and choose another book to do a report or a reading from. So I think it's just basically people trying to impose their own perspective on society.
And since you were a teacher, we're going to move on in a second, but I just find it fascinating. Since you were a teacher in your other life and you have children, so you have the perspective of a parent, and your daughter actually put this in your hands to read, do you think that parents are just, you know, I guess there's most people outside of America, I'm not sure what the stats are, so I'm not going to say we're not a nation of readers per se, but do you think it's because, you know, maybe adults, parents, are not really up to the standards of literature now? Because we're talking people when they were younger, they read edgy books like Judy Blume and, you know, the author of Tiger Eyes, and her name escapes me right now. I know somebody knows it, and you're going to type it in for me. But Hinton, S.E. Hinton. And so, you know, so when they were younger, they were reading books that, you know, the parents kind of questioned, but, you know, I guess it was sort of as well, it wasn't this kind of an outcry. So what do you think about why now they're sort of imposing this sort of individual idea of, well, these books are just too much? I mean, do you think that in comparison to maybe Judy Blume and S.E. Hinton and the like, that they feel that they're just too edgy. But then how does that explain Salinger, that, you know, the parents and even some grandparents now have read when they were younger? What do you think about that?
I think part of it is just lack of awareness, because it's like usually what will happen is that, from my perspective, what I've seen happen is sometimes there'll be one or two parents that will be complaining about something, and then this bandwagon mentality going on. And I know sometimes I've asked people that in my local library, the things that say, "Oh, you're letting your daughter read that?" And I go, "Well, have you read it?" And they go, "No, but I've heard about it." And so it's like, well, then you're making a decision and you're not fully informed.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your point of view and giving us insight on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Let's see who's next on the list. Okay, Hope. I hope you're ready. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep doing these horrible puns, and I don't mean to. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go ahead and put your book up here. I keep doing that by accident. I don't mean to, you know, say that, and it just comes right out. Okay, there you are. And Hope will be reading kind of a side-by-side. As you can see here, it's No Fear Shakespeare, Hamlet. And in these books, what they have is the original Shakespearean English next to a plain English interpretation, sort of like the King James Bible and the New Edition Bible. So, yeah. Hope, take it away.
Okay, so Hamlet has been banned and challenged for violence, themes of suicide and incest. I looked at a couple of different cases. One of them was actually the British Library that blocked it on their website. But apparently that was an accident. But it was their networks. They had the filtering, they had filtering software on their computers, which I think lots of us don't agree with. So the patrons in the library could not actually access the ebook Hamlet, which is kind of ironic for a British library. It's fixed now, but that says something about computer monitoring in libraries. Also, it has been politically banned in Stalin's regime because they claim that Hamlet's indecisiveness and depression were incompatible with the new Soviet spirit of optimism, fortitude, and clarity. And that's a quote from Nori Epstein, who wrote The Friendly Shakespeare. And then it was also banned in 1989 in an Israeli detention camp for Palestinians because of Hamlet's soliloquy about taking up arms instead of suffering silently, which I actually interpret that passage differently, but I guess it's been banned politically in a couple places because of that. And also I was reading that in some cases when the play was still relatively new, that it was censored. At one point it was the references to Denmark were taken out so that they didn't offend, I think it was Anna of Denmark. And then there was something else that I can't remember, and I fortunately don't have it on my notes here. Oh, it was something to do where they had to change something about the royalty because they didn't want to offend a king and queen that was going to see the play, and they couldn't make suggestions that royalty could be so evil as to poison their own king and such. So lots of interesting stuff there. I wanted to read the modern text to you first because I've read Hamlet lots of times and I always thought that I had understood it. But then when I read the English, like the modern English translation, I realized that there was a ton of stuff that I hadn't gotten. And I know a lot of people who love Shakespeare are kind of insulted by the idea that someone would translate all of his language into modern English. But I don't really see it that way because they're putting it side by side. It's not meant to delete the old language. It's just meant as a tool to help you really understand it. And the way I read it is I read the modern one, and then I read the original language, and I can enjoy the original language a lot more, knowing really being able to really understand it. So you don't have the confusing element. And also the soliloquy that I'm reading is also very controversial to a lot of people because it seems very pro-suicide. So of course that's the famous to be or not to be. So I'm going to start with the modern English. The question is it better to be alive or dead? Is it nobler to put up with all the nasty things that luck throws your way, or to fight against all those troubles by simply putting an end to them once and for all? Dying, sleeping, that's all dying is. A sleep that ends all the heartache and shocks that life on earth gives us. That's an achievement to wish for. To die, to sleep may be to dream. Ah, but there's the catch. In death's sleep, who knows what kind of dreams might come after we've put the noise and commotion of life behind us. That's certainly something to worry about. That's the consideration that makes us stretch out our suffering so long. After all, who would put up with all life's humiliations, the abuse from superiors, the insults of arrogant men, the pangs of unrequited love, the inefficiency of the legal system, the rudeness of people in office, and the mistreatment good people have to take from bad, when you could simply take out your knife and call it quits? Who would choose to grunt and sweat through an exhausting life unless they were afraid of something dreadful after death, the undiscovered country from which no visitor returns, which we wonder about without getting any answers from, and which makes us stick to the evils we know rather than rush off to seek the ones we don't? Fear of death makes us all cowards, and our natural boldness becomes weak with too much thinking. Actions that should be carried out at once get misdirected and stop being actions at all. But shh, here comes the beautiful Ophelia. Pretty lady, please remember me when you pray. And then I'll read the original language. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of? Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sickled over with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment with disregard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. Soft you now, the fair Ophelia, nymph, in thy horizons be all my sins remembered. And that's it.
Applause, applause. Thank you so much, Hope. That was excellent. So do we have any questions for Hope? Because we are talking about a classic many, hundreds of years old, and it's being challenged. I mean, this is works that they read as, they've been reading in Harvard and Oxford and, in Backwardsville, USA, they're like, hey, we don't like it. So, or even in the big cities, parents are like, well, I don't think they should be reading that. It's bad for them. Anyone, go ahead and raise your hand. Any questions? Go right ahead, Debbie.
I'd like to know, why is it being banned now? It's centuries old. How long has it been on a banned list?
People have actually been challenging it since it was very young, and censoring it in order to have the play without insulting mostly political leaders. And then it was also banned during the Cold War, and the sort of second Cold War that we had in 1989. And when it's banned politically, it's usually because they don't like the idea of sort of rising up, or they don't like the idea of this royal who is sort of sickened by his own sort of regime, I guess. It really paints royals in a bad light, instead of, like honoring them or lifting them up as those people might prefer. And also some people say that it's too violent. You have a couple of little duels and stuff in there. People die, of course. And a lot of people don't like the suicide because, as you can tell by the soliloquy, it's very pro-suicide. He's basically saying, who would want to live in the first place? And I guess people are worried that teenagers who might already be depressed or something are going to, say, yeah, let's give up. I really don't know.
Okay, any other questions? While someone thinks of a question, because I think Debbie had one, but she... okay, go right ahead, Perlita.
I was just wondering if Hope has a preference, the plain English or the Shakespeare original version.
I do prefer the original Shakespeare, but I am glad to have read the modern English because I really thought I had understood it before, but I hadn't. And so I like reading, I really like to read the modern first and then read Shakespeare so that I can really understand it, and then I can enjoy the language a lot more because I'm not getting frustrated, being confused or anything. But it's definitely, the original Shakespeare is definitely beautiful, and I prefer that.
Well, you did say that, one of the things that parents didn't like, among others, was that, they didn't like, the suicide and, the things that Hamlet had to go through as a young person. So my question to you is, as a classic, this was written hundreds of years ago. Do you think that the problems that Hamlet had are still viable to young people today? And if you think so, which problem do you think is more powerful for the young person reading it and more problematic for the adult who's worried about it? Like, for example, the suicide issue, the family dysfunction issue, the second family issue. Lots of young people are going through that now, where they're part of, I guess they call a blended family or secondary family because their parents divorced or one person died, and so now someone else is the father or stepfather or stepmother, or kind of what people are now dubbing first world problems, where oh, my iPhone broke, I want to just jump off a building. So what do you think? So I think I put a bunch in there. So again, do you think the problems that Hamlet had are still viable to young people? And which one do you think is more powerful for the young person, and which is more problematic for the adult?
I think that it is still relevant because I think at the core of it, really, Hamlet is very conflicted about what is the right thing to do. And when somebody has done something horrific, is it your job to make sure that there's been justice? And Hamlet keeps a lot of secrets. He copes with things in very strange ways, like pretending to go mad and possibly actually going mad. And I think like teenagers are, when they're dealing with problems and they don't know what is the right thing to do, and that they don't know how to handle stuff, they don't know how to cope with stuff. I think that's very similar to Hamlet. Of course, his problems are a lot more specific, so there's not going to be really teenagers who are dealing with things like their uncle murdering their father, but they'll still be dealing with things that to them are just as huge. As far as for the ones that I think parents are most afraid of, I think it is sort of the problems that Hamlet has with authority, and also the possible suicide of Ophelia, and Hamlet's suicidal thoughts, I think, probably bother them the most. Was that all of your question?
Oh, yes. Okay, anyone else? And, okay, it doesn't look like we have any more, so I'll do the final question that everybody gets. Do you agree with the complaints that people have? I mean, having read the book, kind of thinking about it, what do you think about the complaints? Not necessarily do you agree, but do you see, the side of the people who are complaining?
I don't really. I know when people are worried that it's going to cause people to not like authority or something like that, I don't think it's a bad idea to make people think about authority, or to realize that other people agonize over decisions and good and evil and stuff like that. Everything that people complain about in this play, I just don't think it's that bad. It's just not that serious. As far as people who claim that there's incest in the book, I would say, well, in the first place, the queen is not actually related to Claudius, and in the second place, they don't show anything. I don't think that's grounds for being banned. And it shocks me every time when a classic is banned or challenged. And I also think it's important. It's just important for people to read it, because I think it's a good read about struggling with things and trying to cope with things. And I like how Ophelia is so conflicted, and she's in this very patriarchal relationship with her father, and when he dies and she has no husband to tell her what to do, she sort of loses her mind. And through the play, I really just like to see how she does everything she's told, and then once he's gone, she just doesn't know what to do with herself. And I also like how her and both Hamlet are dealing with their roles in life, and the realities and the evils of the world, and how you can't exactly do what you're supposed to do because everything is more complicated than that. So I think it's important that people read it. And the objections people have really pale to the reasons that it should be read.
Excellent. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if anyone has a question, just go ahead and put your hand up, because I know Debbie just got her audio going. So if you have any questions, Debbie, please let me know. This is just, I guess this isn't in the book that you have, but they do have graphic novels. And here I just thought I would show everyone a page from the graphic novels they have by the Side-by-Side Shakespeare series. And so they did wander into the comic/graphic novel arena to make it more visual and to get a variety of readers interested. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to move on. Thank you again. And let's see. Next we have, let's see, Shauna Stewart. Shauna here. Are you ready, Shauna? And let's see, Shauna's going to read another book that finds itself continuously on these lists, The Bluest Eye. So, Shauna, go right ahead and take it away.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Cool. Good. So this is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It was Toni Morrison's first book that she published in 1970. It's about the year in the life of a young black girl named Pekala who develops an inferiority complex because she doesn't have light skin and blue eyes, which is where the title comes from. It's set in Ohio during the Great Depression, and Toni Morrison's from Ohio, so that's probably why she chose that setting. It's going to deal clearly with racism pretty seriously just because of the subject matter, but it actually gets banned a lot for scenes of incest, pedophilia, and rape. So it's dealing with a lot of complicated sexual themes, and recently it was adopted as part of the Common Core curriculum for 11th graders, and that's the context it's been challenged in recently, with sometimes a lot by lawmakers who want to change Common Core because they don't agree with it, but parents as well because of the sexual themes. Again, it's read a lot in 11th and 12th grade, and I think that people are uncomfortable with their teenagers reading something with that much sexual content in it. And it's just difficult for me to understand that personally because this is when teenagers are becoming adults and when they're having to deal with that kind of stuff. Like Eddie said, they're perfectly familiar with sexual content at this point most of the time. And I found this statistic that more than 10% of women in high school are sexually assaulted. So I don't think that because there's a scene about rape in the book that it should be banned for that. Rather, I think it's important to have an open discussion in a safe, comfortable atmosphere with an adult who knows what they're talking about. I know that I didn't read this in high school. I didn't read Toni Morrison until I went to college, and it really changed the way that I think a lot, and I'm really glad that I had the professor that I had. So I think it's important to, expose this kind of literature to students when they're in the classroom rather than ban it altogether. So the passage that I chose is the very end of the book, so I'm sorry if you haven't read it. I didn't choose one of the controversial scenes, but I wanted to read something that's, I think Toni Morrison's writing is so beautiful, and I wanted to pick something that kind of talks about a lot of the themes in the book going on with the main character and the people around her, and show a little bit of Toni Morrison's writing and what I really like about reading her books. So I'm going to go ahead and read that excerpt. A little black girl yearns for the blue eyes of a little white girl, and the horror at the heart of her yearning is exceeded only by the evil of fulfillment. We saw her sometimes, Frida and I, after the baby came too soon and died, after the gossip and the slow wagging of heads. She was so sad to see. Grown-up people looked away. Children, those who were not frightened by her, laughed outright. The damage done was total. She spent her days, her tendril sap-green days, walking up and down, her head jerking to the beat of a drummer so distant only she could hear. Elbows bent, hands on shoulders, she flailed her arms like a bird in an eternal, grotesquely futile effort to fly. Beating the air, a winged but grounded bird, intent on the blue void it could not reach, could not even see, but which filled the valleys of the mind. We tried to see her without looking at her, and never, never went near. Not because she was absurd or repulsive, or because we were frightened, but because we had failed her. Our flowers never grew. I was convinced that Frida was right, that I had planted them too deeply. How could I have been so sloven? So we avoided Pekala Breedlove forever. And the years folded up like pocket handkerchiefs. Sammy left town long ago. Charlie died in the workhouse. Mrs. Breedlove still does housework. And Pekala is somewhere in that little brown house she and her mother moved to on the edge of town, where you can see her even now, once in a while. The bird-like gestures are worn away to a mere picking and plucking her way between the tire rims and the sunflowers, between Coke bottles and milkweed, among all the waste and beauty of the world, which is what she herself was. All of our waste which we dumped on her and which she absorbed, and all of our beauty which was hers first and which she gave to us. All of us, all who knew her, felt so wholesome after we cleaned ourselves on her. We were so beautiful when we stood astride her ugliness. Her simplicity decorated us, her guilt sanctified us, her pain made us glow with health, her awkwardness made us think we had a sense of humor. Her inarticulateness made us believe we were eloquent. Her poverty kept us generous. Even her waking dreams we used to silence our own nightmares. And she let us, and thereby deserved our contempt. We honed our egos on her, padded our characters with her frailty, and yawned in the fantasy of our strength. And fantasy it was, for we were not strong, only aggressive. We were not free, merely licensed. We were not compassionate, we were polite. Not good, but well behaved. We courted death in order to call ourselves brave, and hid like thieves from life. We substituted good grammar for intellect. We switched habits to simulate maturity. We rearranged lies and called it truth, seeing in the new pattern of an old idea the revelation and the word. She, however, stepped over into madness, a madness which protected her from us simply because it bored us in the end. Oh, some of us loved her, the Maginot Line, and Charlie loved her, I'm sure he did. He, at any rate, was the one who loved her enough to touch her, envelop her, give something of himself to her. But his touch was fatal, and the something he gave her filled the matrix of her agony with death. Love is never any better than the lover. Wicked people love wickedly. Violent people love violently. Weak people love weakly. Stupid people love stupidly, but the love of a free man is never safe. There is no gift for the beloved. The lover alone possesses his gift of love. The loved one is shorn, neutralized, frozen in the glare of the lover's eye. And that's it.
Thank you so much. That was really great reading. All right, so I know there are questions. So anyone have a question for our reader right now? And just so you guys know, let me go ahead and post this. There is, oops, let me see. Okay, there it is. As I was looking, I saw that there was kind of a history and literature series, and they do kind of like a story behind and then, you know, different books. And so there's a story, there's one, History and Literature, the story behind Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And I do see that in this book, they do ask Toni Morrison, you know, what led her to write the book, what is it, semi-autobiographical? And so on Goodreads, it just says that the author reveals ways that The Bluest Eye explores themes of race and identity, and how Chloe Anthony Wolford Morrison's experiences might have affected her storytelling and writing. It's a nice companion book by a well-informed author. So this is pretty much recommended. It got 4 out of 5 stars. And so this is just to give you guys sort of another way to get insight into the book and why it was written. Okay, so any questions? So I actually have one for you. So what about this book was the most powerful in terms of, you know, I guess the themes, or maybe there was a line in the book, or just the subject matter of this? Because I think some of you may or may not know, some years ago, and then again recently, maybe a few years, a couple of years ago, they did a study about how children of, you know, different ethnic groups and colors and religions, you know, but mostly I think it was just the skin color they were kind of focused on, how they thought about themselves. And so what they did was they showed like a line of dolls. They showed them dolls, or like pictures, and the dolls ranged from very, very pale to very, very dark. And so they would ask the kids questions like, which child is the pretty child, and which child is the good child, and which child is the naughty child, and why is that child naughty, or why is that child good? And the results were very interesting. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that this book has some, what's the most powerful thing in the book for you as the reader?
Right. It definitely stood out a lot for me. We talked about that experiment in the class that I read this for. And for me, I don't remember reading anything like this when I was in high school. I don't really remember talking about race and literature in my English classes in high school. And when I read this, I think it was it was in a young adult class in college, English class. And so I read it alongside of like Looking for Alaska and Catcher in the Rye. And I had never really had the vocabulary or ability really to talk about those kinds of problems because I hadn't been exposed to it in high school at all. And so the whole bluest eye thing where she just so desperately wanted blue eyes that she went mad really stuck with me. And I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff, and race can be really difficult to talk about. So I'm really glad that we did this book in that class because it changed a lot about how I think and how I talk and how I'm able to talk about it.
Go right ahead, Debbie.
I have a supplementary resource you might be interested in. The King Library has a brand new resource. It's called Canopy Streaming Video, and it has a large collection of videos from a wide variety of sources over the last 20 and 30 and more years. But there is an interview with Toni Morrison, and I'll put the link into the chat window here. This was from 1989, and she talks for about 40 minutes. She's interviewed. She talks about comparing spoken with written language. She talks about defining oneself as a writer of Black American literature and also as being a woman novelist. So you might enjoy that too.
Thank you. And also in the chat box, I came across when I first started reading about this, because I guess I got over to that area because back in I want to say the 60s, there was an experiment that a teacher did with segregated classroom. It was all white students. And I think this sort of kind of pushed this doll experiment into the forefront, but she was kind of one of the first people. Her name escapes me. I'll think of it in a minute. But she divided the class into children with blue eyes and children with brown eyes. And so, one day she told the blue-eyed children how special they were, and the brown-eyed children how low and common they were and how bad they were. And then the next day she flipped it. And this was all sort of to teach. And these were, I think they were like third or fourth graders, but it was sort of to teach them, about the impending sort of segregation issues that were, really rampant throughout the country, and how, you can't just judge someone on your looks. And so I think this is kind of the next step on how it affects, young children. So this is a very important book, and I guess the reasons would be it's a huge discomfort to adults to have to kind of have their children read this and then start asking them about it. Any more questions? Oh yes, thank you, Jane Elliott. And she's also in YouTube, and it shows they have actual footage of her experiment on YouTube. Just put her name in there, and they have the parents behind this window. The kids can't see the parents, I don't think, and the reaction that the parents have is really remarkable and really telling, and just how heartbreaking the whole thing is. And I think all of you would really just learn a lot by watching a few of these. Okay, any more questions? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Okay. So I'm going to ask you the question that I've asked everyone, and what do you feel about the complaints about the book? Do you feel that on one hand they have merit, or forget those people, they're crazy, or can you see a point to it? What is your idea about the merits of the complaints?
I really do understand where parents are coming from when they're worried about this kind of stuff, because like you said, they a lot of times will then have to talk to their kids about it. But I do think that 17 and 18-year-olds are mature enough to talk about it and deal with it, and it's better to have them do it in a classroom with a teacher that knows how to teach it and talk about it than have them, you know, because Toni Morrison's a pretty well-known name. They could go out to the library and decide to read a Toni Morrison book because they want to read a little bit more, and if they don't have a teacher to talk to about it, then they have to talk to their parents. So, you know, and people ban it for the sexual scenes. So it's, you know, I get how people are uncomfortable with it, but in my opinion, I think it kind of comes from an uneducated place because they don't know how to talk about it with their kids.
Got it. Okay. And actually, I lied. That was not the last question because another one popped into my head. This is the age of movies made from books, even controversial books. And so this one dealing on the subject matter and thinking about what happened with the Hunger Games. When the Hunger Games was made into a film, and one of the characters, there was a big, I don't know if you guys heard of it, but it was a big to-do about the character of Rue in the Hunger Games being portrayed by an actress of color. And so everyone kind of freaked out, and what they found out was behind that was that they didn't, a lot of people reading the book didn't read the book thoroughly, and they didn't know that in the book she was a person of color. So it was this big outcry about why did they hire an actress of color to portray this very sympathetic character. And it was a big story for a while because there were a lot of tweets and Facebook postings about how once the character was one of color, a lot of the readers didn't feel sympathy for her anymore when she died. And so it just showed this big gap between what we think young people know about relations with people of difference that are different than who they are and how they read books. So what do you think about it becoming a film? And even a film perhaps for young people. And somebody had their hand up. Who was it? Could you do it again so I can see? Somebody had their hand up. Okay, if you have a question, go ahead and put your hand up again so I can see. But what do you think about that? And then we'll move on.
What do I think about The Bluest Eye becoming a movie?
Yes.
Has it been a movie before?
I didn't see that. If it was, forgive me, but what do you think about it becoming like a film now?
Yeah, well, you know, I think that I talk about representation all the time, and I remember when that happened with the Hunger Games, and it was pretty upsetting because she's so clearly a woman of color in the book, but when you read stuff, you kind of picture yourself, I think, in a lot of the characters. And Katniss is never really described as all that white either, but she's the protagonist, so that's what they did. But I think representation is so important, and I think if someone wanted to tackle The Bluest Eye, it could be really amazing. And representation is another reason that I think that this kind of book needs to be taught to 11th and 12th graders, because if they're not reading books with different types of people in them, then they walk away from high school without that sympathy and that empathy. I mean, I think there's some studies that show that reading helps with your empathy skills and sympathy skills. So, it's pretty important. And I'm going to look up and see if it's been a movie or not, because I'm not sure. It might be kind of a hard one to make into a movie, but it's like The Color Purple, which was a great movie.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for your reading. It was wonderful. And again, did somebody have a question? I just want to be sure that I'm letting everybody... Oh, Shauna, was that you? Did you have a question? Yeah. So anyone? Okay. All right. Well, speaking of Shauna, Shauna, Shauna. Okay. So thank you so much, Shauna. And so we're going to move on to the next person. And that's going to be Debbie, who's going to be reading The Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. So let me get that book cover up for her. Are you ready, Debbie?
Yes, I am.
Okay, hold on. Apparently there's a problem with loading the image, so let me try it like this. Well, while I get that going, go ahead and get started. So for everyone who came in later, how we're doing the books is we're introducing the reader, the name of the book, and then what you're going to do is just give us kind of a lowdown of what the book is about, why it's been challenged. If you have an example of how it's been challenged or censored or banned, you could go ahead and let us know, and then go right into your reading. Okay? So go right ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. My name's Debbie Verba, and this book won a 2007 National Book Award and 2009 Odyssey Award for Best Audiobook. It was one of the frequently challenged books of the 21st century because it was banned because they felt it was unsuited to the age group, which is young adult. It has offensive language, sexually explicit material, such as talks about masturbation. It was called racist and vulgar language. There was sexually themed jokes, and it dealt with topics of alcoholism and violence. So I'm going to read the beginning of the book, and the first chapter is The Black Eye of the Month Club. I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so that's not exactly true. I was actually born with too much cerebral spinal fluid inside my skull. But cerebral spinal fluid is just the doctor's fancy way of saying brain grease. And brain grease works inside the lobes like car grease works inside an engine. It keeps things running smooth and fast. But weirdo me, I was born with too much grease inside my skull, and it got all thick and muddy and disgusting, and it only mucked up the words. My thinking and breathing and living engines slowed down and flooded. My brain was drowning in grease, but that makes the whole thing sound weirdo and funny, like my brain was a giant French fry, so it seems more serious and poetic and accurate to say I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so maybe that's not a very serious way to say it either. Maybe the whole thing is weird and funny. But geez, did my mother and father and big sister and grandma and cousins and aunts and uncles think it was funny when the doctors cut up my little skull and sucked out all the extra water with some tiny vacuum? I was only 6 months old and I was supposed to croak during the surgery. And even if I somehow survived the mini Hoover, I was supposed to suffer serious brain damage during the procedure and live the rest of my life as a vegetable. Well, I obviously survived the surgery. I wouldn't be writing this if I didn't, but I have all sorts of physical problems that are directly the result of my brain damage. First of all, I ended up having 42 teeth. The typical human has 32, right? But I had 42. 10 more than usual, 10 more than normal, 10 teeth past human. My teeth got so crowded that I could barely close my mouth. I went to Indian Health Services to get some teeth pulled so I could eat normally, not like some slobbering vulture. But the Indian Health Service funded major dental work only once a year. So I had to have all 10 extra teeth pulled in one day. And what's more, our white dentist believed that Indians only felt half as much pain as white people did, so he only gave us half of the Novocaine. What a bastard, huh? Indian Health Service also funded eyeglass purchases only once a year and offered one style, those ugly, thick, black plastic ones. My brain damage left me nearsighted in one eye and farsighted in the other, so my ugly glasses were all lopsided because my eyes were so lopsided. I get headaches because my eyes are like enemies, you know, like they used to be married to each other, but now hate each other's guts. And I started wearing glasses when I was 3, so I ran around the res looking like a 3-year-old Indian grandpa. And oh, I was skinny. I'd turn sideways and disappear. But my hands and feet were huge. My feet were a size 11 in 3rd grade. With my big feet and penciled body, I looked like a capital L walking down the road, and my skull was enormous, epic. And what's nice about this book is that it's actually inspired by the author's experiences as an adolescent. So it really brings reality, especially for what he went through as far as prejudice and being an Indian. And it's a lot of people think it's really funny. I chose something that I was not familiar with, and I personally didn't laugh just because I'm so sensitive, and the subjects he dealt with were so deep and sad, but it's good that he added the humor, otherwise I think I'd be crying for the whole book.
Wow, thank you. Okay, does anyone have a question about the book, or how she feels about the book, or the topic, or themes? One of the, while I guess everybody thinks about, you know, whether they have a question, or maybe they'll think of one as I ask my question. Thank you again for that read. It was great. So when he was talking about you know, having to go to the dentist and the glasses and the things like that, once again, and I guess that happens because we're all grad students and we read like crazy. Plus we're librarians to be. It does remind me how this year and last year, I've been seeing a lot of articles popping up in health journals and in health sections of a lot of magazines and journals about pain management, and how it is really true that a lot of health professionals do think that minority groups don't feel as much pain as non-minorities. So they don't get the proper care. And I think one of the reasons, I'm trying to remember, but it's like because like for example, black people had to go through so much, and so they're stronger people, so they don't feel it. So if they break something, or they have a toothache or whatever it is, they're more stoic about it. So they handle pain much better, and therefore they don't need as much treatment for it. That's what a lot of medical professionals in 2014 think. So not all, but many. So again, this book, once again, writers really tap into a lot of things that we don't think is true, or we think it's outlandish, or maybe it's true for, you know, this particular person or a small amount of people. But then, you know, as social scientists and educators and writers dig deeper into questioning these things, we find out a lot more. So thinking of that, how do you think the science matches up with the book? So my question is, you know, do you think the science matches up with the book, and what do you think about that? Oh, I'm sorry, Debbie. That was a question for you. I apologize. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm talking without hitting the button. I really didn't realize that that was a problem until I read the book. I didn't realize that minorities were treated that way. I certainly have seen a lot of prejudice, but until I read the book, I didn't realize that they went through that. Although I have to say, I'm white, Caucasian, and I went to the dentist and I had 4 cavities drilled without Novocaine because the dentist thought I could handle it. I was tough. So that's why I never thought that, I thought it wasn't a problem, an issue. However, that's the wonderful thing about reading so much, you learn. And there's a great picture in the book, and half of a boy is white, half is Indian, and it'll have, for example, Glad garbage book bag, and then you have ergonomic backpack with cell phone, Kmart t-shirt, Ralph Lauren t-shirt, and you know, he has a family of history of diabetes and cancer, and the white person, the future is bright, and it's a vanishing past for the Indian. So it really delves into topics like you described, and I've really learned a lot.
Thank you. Brooke, go right ahead.
Okay. There were a slew of reasons that this book has been challenged that you read back in the beginning. But what do you think the real motivation was after reading the book? Can you, or maybe think of a couple of reasons that you think people really challenged the book? Because sometimes I see things written, like reading the Banned Books website, and various reasons they've, you know, that the top 10 books have been challenged for each year. And I look at them and I think there's more to it than that. That's what they're putting down on paper, but what's really driving this? Do you have any thoughts or ideas that come to you after reading this book as to why it might have been challenged?
You know, I'm a mom of teenagers, and I've worked in the schools, and a couple of things. One, this is a young adult book, so you can have an immature 13-year-old wanting to read this book, or a 19-year-old. So that's one of the problems where I can actually understand why a parent of a younger teen may not want them to read this book. Some parents, because of their religion, they do not work at a library. They don't want any vulgar language in a book because of their religion. They won't read it for that reason. Others, the schools could definitely have a problem with the sexuality, not wanting to read that in the classroom. I know my boys are reading a book, and sometimes they just read parts of the book, not the whole book. And that part where it's unsuited for the age group, I think that has to do with what I said as far as the maturity of the child, because they might not be able to handle that. But I think it's mostly because of the sexually themed parts.
Hope, go right ahead.
I just had a question about, like, when they say that a child won't be able to handle it, I'm not quite sure what people mean by that. Like, what's going to happen to them, and what part are they going to get confused by or upset by? That what's going to happen? I don't know what it means by they can't handle it.
There are so many parents that come to the library and are extremely particular. They don't allow their kids, a lot of them even teenagers, to read certain books because they feel that they're not ready. They haven't maybe discussed some sexual themes. They don't feel that their 12 or 13-year-old can handle. A lot of people say they're very sensitive. I hear that word a lot. And you know, certain books make them cry, or they're not ready for the maturity that maybe this book might need. So I'm just talking about what I hear from a lot of parents. And now I feel this book's wonderful absolutely wonderful to expose kids to what is going on. And I think by reading this book, they can learn and maybe see something in themselves that they have done that is wrong. So I'm not saying that I agree with that, but so many parents are very, very strict about reading materials.
Okay. Brooke?
Sorry, but what you just said totally brought up another thought that I had. I have not read this story, but I would actually like to. Do you think, because you brought up like the issue of language and parents not wanting their children or their teenagers to read, foul language. Is the language in the book, the cursing or whatever, is it presented in a manner that makes you think that others would want to emulate it? And this is a personal call because obviously it's so subjective, but I was just curious as to your opinion because you are kind of on both sides of the spectrum, hearing the parent side, but yet having read it and appreciating it in its own right. So I was just interested in what you had to say.
I can't imagine kids wanting to emulate it only because from what I hear from my boys about high school, they say that kids the language they use is unbelievable and it's every other word is a swear word. So by the time you're able to read this book, if either you're swearing or you're not, I don't think you're going to pick it up from this book. And it's done and it mixes humor with seriousness. It's a good mix, and if you really skim through it and just turn the pages, you don't really see, it's not like it's profanity, a ton of it. He does a great job in getting to the point without, it's not like he's swearing every 2 minutes or anything like that.
Thank you. So any more? Oh, let me see. Who is that? Hope. Go right ahead.
I just think it's cool that you get to see sort of the reactions from parents. I only got a little bit of that when I worked in a public library, so I think it would be super interesting to kind of hear what everybody complains about. So thanks for the unique perspective.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, it's nice to learn, but it's also infuriating. I mean, you'd be surprised. Some parents actually the other day said to their child, do not look in the nonfiction area. It's boring. It's reports only. So you hear all kinds of things. And the neat thing about what we're going to be doing is that you can make a big difference and just introduce and hopefully help parents, but not really get too involved, but give hints.
I was reading once about why that's part of the reason that school libraries are important, because the kid can go to the library without the parent there. So they can actually look at things without somebody over their shoulder telling them, judging everything that they pick up.
That is so true. So many parents do not let their children pick the books they want. They come alone, and then you wonder why kids don't like reading, because the parents are picking for them.
So as librarians and students, we are finding out that, a lot of times we're having to step in as not only educators, but also as, like a friend of mine and I were talking, we're no longer gatekeepers. In the past, a lot of librarians thought of themselves as gatekeepers, but now we're key masters. We provide people with the key to get to the information that they want, and we're guides. We're Gandalf. No, okay. So anyway, the point being is that we're finding ourselves having to take the place of a lot of not just other educational institutions like the classrooms, but also the homes. I don't remember where I heard it or saw it, but someone was saying that the home library is also shrinking. And again, it's like you were saying, parents are starting to kind of stock these home libraries instead of letting the children kind of have a hand in it. Okay, so we're going to move on. And again, thank you guys for hanging in and for participating in support. And because we did get a late start because I was having technical issues and I was having trouble getting everything loaded in, we're going to just run just a few minutes over. So I'm asking everyone just please hang in there. It's just going to be another few minutes. We have 2 more people to go. And so we'll just pop right through that and move forward, okay? Oh yeah, when I was growing up, and my parents bought a lot of the books I liked. So again, we're kind of getting into a culture where parents are, what's the word, bubble wrapping? They're very nervous about book content, and so they're beginning to choose the books rather than letting the children kind of have a hand in it. Okay, so any more questions? And as a matter of fact, you answered the question that I ask everybody at the end about whether they think it's fair, and thank you so much for that. I thought your answer was really thoughtful and excellent. Thank you. So the next person we have is Joanne, and she's going to be reading Slaughterhouse 5. So let me get that graphic up for you. Oh yeah, that's the other word, helicoptering. And, you know, so Ivy League professors have a lot of interesting things to say about things that occur with parents calling up and wondering why their kid didn't get an A. But anyway, moving forward, Joanne, are you ready?
My name is Joanne Parkinson, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. It was written in 1969. I'm in the process.
Uh-oh, did we lose you? Okay, she probably just has to plug in and plug back. Okay, I see her mic. Okay, can you? Oh, I thought I heard something. Go ahead, Joanne.
Can you hear me now?
Yay! Go right ahead.
Yeah, I heard hit the mute button on my headset. Sorry, everybody. I'm not sure how much you caught, so I'll repeat myself. My name is Joanne Parkinson, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. It was written in 1969. I'm in the process of reading this book, so for the band book week, I went out and purchased it at the bookstore, and I brought it home. It's one of my husband's favorite books, so I'm dedicating my read to him. It's an anti-war book written with a satirical slant. It's a story about Billy Pilgrim, a World War II vet who was also a POW who survived the Dresden fire bombings. And throughout the book, he travels through times where he becomes unstuck. So he visits various parts of his life and the future over and over again, having to relive them. And this book has been banned multiple times. In 1973, it was actually burned in Michigan, and it has been banned as recently as 2007, predominantly for language. There is a lot of explicit language used, sexual content, the portrayal of women, and religious matters. There's one quote, my husband actually mentioned it today, so it must be pretty prominent, and a reason why the book had been banned was there is a quote where the gun made a ripping sound like the opening of the fly of God Almighty, and I guess that offended quite a few people. So I'm going to start by reading chapter 2, which is basically setting up the story and showing how he had a pretty seemingly normal life until all of a sudden living in a world where he was held by aliens. Listen. Billy Pilgrim has become unstuck in time. Billy has gone to sleep, a senile widower, and awakened by his wedding day. He has walked through a door in 1955 and come out another in 1941. He's gone back through the door to find himself in 1963. He has seen his birth and death many times, and he says and pays random visits to all the events in between. he says. Billy is spastic in time, has no control over where he's going next. The trips aren't necessarily fun. He is in a constant state of stage fright, he says, because he never knows what part of his life he is going to have to act in next. Billy was born in 1922 in Ilium, New York, the only child of a barber there. He was a funny-looking child who became a funny-looking youth, tall and weak, shaped like a bottle of Coca-Cola. He graduated from Ilium High School in the upper third of his class and attended night sessions at the Ilium School of Optometry for one semester before being drafted for military service in the Second World War. His father died in a hunting accident during the war, so it goes. Billy saw service in the infantry in Europe and was taken prisoner by the Germans. After honorable discharge from the Army in 1945, Billy again enrolled in Ilium School of Optometry. During his senior year there, he became engaged to the daughter of a founder and owner of the school, and then suffered a mild nervous collapse. He was treated in the Veterans Hospital near Lake Placid and was given shock treatments and released. He married his fiancée, finished his education, and was set up for business in the Ilium by his father-in-law. Ilium is a particularly good city for optometrists because the General Forge and Foundry Company is there. Every employee is required to own a pair of safety glasses and to wear them in areas where manufacturing is going on. GF&F has 68,000 employees in Ilium. That calls for a lot of lenses and a lot of frames. Frames are where the money is. Billy became rich. He had 2 children, Barbara and Robert. In time, his daughter Barbara married another optometrist, and Billy set him up in business. Billy's son Robert had a lot of trouble in high school, but then joined the famous Green Beret. He straightened out, became a fine young man, and he fought in Vietnam. Early in 1968, a group of optometrists, with Billy among them, chartered an airplane to fly from Ilium to the International Convention of Optometrists in Montreal. The plane crashed atop of the Sugar Bush Mountain in Vermont. Everybody was killed but Billy, so it goes. While Billy was recuperating in the hospital in Vietnam, his wife died accidentally of carbon monoxide poisoning, so it goes. When Billy finally got home to Ilium after the airplane crash, he was quiet for a while. He had a terrible scar across the top of his skull. He didn't resume practice. He had a housekeeper. His daughter came over almost every day. And then, without warning, Billy went to New York City and got on an all-night radio program devoted to talk. He told about having come unstuck in time. He said, too, that he had been kidnapped by a flying saucer in 1967. The saucer was from the planet Tralfamadore, he said. He was taken to Tralfamadore, where he was displayed naked in a zoo, he said. He was mated there with a former Earthling movie star named Montana Wildhack. Some night owls in Ilium heard Billy on the radio. One of them called Billy's daughter Barbara. Barbara was upset. She and her father went down to New York and brought Billy home. Billy insisted mildly that everything he had said on the radio was true. He said that he had been kidnapped by Tralfamadorians on the night of his daughter's wedding. He hasn't been missed, he said, because the Tralfamadorians had taken him through a time warp so that he could be on the Tralfamadore for years and still be away from Earth only for a microsecond. Another month went by without incident, and then Billy wrote a letter to the Ilium News Leader, which the paper published. It described the creatures from Tralfamadore. The letter said that they were 2 feet high and green and shaped like plumber's friends. Their suction cups were on the ground, and their shafts, which were extremely flexible, usually pointed to the sky. At the top of each shaft was a little hand with a green eye in its palm. The creatures were friendly, and they could see in 4 dimensions. They pitied Earthlings for being able to see only 3. They had many wonderful things to teach Earthlings, especially about time. Billy promised to tell what some of those wonderful things were in his next letter. Billy was working on a second letter when the first letter was published. The second letter started out like this. The most important thing I learned on Tralfamadore was that when a person dies, he only appears to die. He is still very much alive in the past. So it is very silly for people to cry at his funeral. All moments past, present, and future always have existed, always will exist. The Tralfamadorians can look at the different moments just the way we can look at a stretch of the Rocky Mountains, for instance. They can see how permanent all the moments are, and they can look at any moment that interests them. It is just an illusion we have here on Earth that one moment follows another, like beads on a string, and that once a moment is gone, it is gone forever. When a Trifomodorian sees a corpse, all he thinks is that the dead person is in bad condition in that particular moment, but that the same person is just fine in plenty of other moments. Now, when I myself hear that somebody is dead, I simply shrug and say what the Trifomodorians say about dead people, which is, so it goes.
Excellent reading. Thank you so much. So, does anyone, yes, I forgot my applause, applause. And so while I kind of cut and paste this other picture, because it turns out that Slaughterhouse-Five, like some of our other books, was made into a film quite some time ago. And as you can see by the poster here, it was 1972. It was the winner of the Cannes Film Festival Jury Prize Award, the only American film, I guess at that time, to be so honored. And there's a few critics' notes and some pictures. And also, as I was taking a look at this, I saw that IMDb gave it 7 out of 10. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 77%, so not bad. So that's something that you guys could kind of take a look at. That seems a very strange book. Let's see, what did you, in terms of the book being banned, you did talk about, you know, some things that your husband told you, and you told us about why some of the other I guess people who complained about the book, why they censored it and even burned it. So let's get right to it. What do you think about that? Do you see a point? Do you kind of understand it? What do you think?
I think people are scared when they don't understand or they feel challenged by it, especially in this case with the religion. When people are very devout or very passionate about something, it's easy to take offense. I think it was a satirical comment about a very horrible aspect of something that goes on in the world every day, which is war. And it was a way for the author, who was a World War vet, he actually did survive the bombings in Dresden, probably for a way for him to kind of cope with that. I did a little bit more research, and it was talking about the jumping back and forth and maybe accounting for the violence as post-traumatic stress syndrome, and maybe a way for people to kind of deal with that or comment on that. I flipped through the book and I did see there was one passage about one of the characters who was going to fucking kill somebody, and he talked about how he did kill a dog, like if you bite me, if you burn me, I'll get you back kind of mentality, in which he had killed a dog by putting metal in some meat and watching the dog then chew its own stomach out after biting this person. So it is very graphic, but it's one of those things where I think somebody else mentioned it. People or kids and people, they're already exposed to this, and it's a way to start a conversation. It's not necessarily about the act itself. It's about what is that act that the author is writing about really saying, which I think people should pay attention to. In 2006, I got this information from the ALA site. It said it was banned in 2006 by one, let me see if I have my notes here, in a Northwest Suburban high school, and it was banned by, it felt that Christian beliefs were kind of challenged here and it was controversial, and the person who banned it hadn't even actually read the book. They went on the internet and pulled up excerpts of it. So I think like things like that are dangerous. Like how much of this was banned because of word of mouth versus someone actually taking the time to read it and understand it and see the perspective of the author.
Excellent. Anyone have a question about the book or the themes? And I guess while I guess somebody, if anyone has a question and you come up with it, I'm going to go ahead and post this quote by George Bernard Shaw. And I know it's very teeny tiny. Let me see if I could get it to get a little bit bigger there. And George Bernard Shaw says, if you're going to tell people the truth, you'd better make them laugh, otherwise they'll kill you. And another quote that he says is, all great truths begin as blasphemies. I think he said that. And so that kind of reminded me when you were talking about the book and some of the things that you thought were threatening to people. And so, because I'm thinking, well, he was a soldier. He knew the horrors of war, as did Tolkien. But everybody except Tolkien, I guess because, you know, there's fairies and, you know, it's not a direct assault. It's not that you're making them laugh when you read Lord of the Rings, books, but it takes you out of the truth of it. It's not a blasphemous thing to say because you're not coming at them head on and directly. You're kind of, you know, painting it with, you know, colors, and you can remove yourself from it. And so even though we see these great battle scenes, you know, it's between elves and orcs, and who cares, and a bunch of, you know, hobbits. And it's not, you know, blankly saying, this is the way it is. I imagine Platoon had a similar effect. It was, you know, people thought it was very gritty and realistic, but then it also got sort of pointed at, and people were upset. So, yes, Brooke. Fantasy and therefore more acceptable. So any questions before we move on to the very last person, and we're going to pop through it because I know that we started late, and so we want to, you know, round it off, make sure everybody gets their chance. Thank you guys for holding in. And so without further ado, if there are no more questions, Madeline, are you here? You are. Okay, so Madeline is going to give us a little talk about the Watchmen, and I'm really excited because I did want to put her at the end because she's doing a graphic novel. So, Madeline, are you ready to go?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hit it.
All right, so I have a confession to make. I only started reading comics and graphic novels about a year ago, and I don't know how I really missed out on them for the majority of my lifetime because I haven't been able to put them down since. And when I was doing my research for this talk, and I started thinking that I wanted to do Watchmen because I just started reading it. It's the most recent one that I've started. And I thought that I wanted to do it, and I honestly thought that there would be more of a history of challenges to the book, but the history that exists is kind of shady. According to the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, there have only been a couple of challenges that have been recorded and or reported. I don't know why I said recorded. Reported, and they were back in the early 2000s, and in neither case were the books actually successfully challenged and then removed from the libraries. But the reason why a lot of comic books and graphic novels come under fire is because they're often shelved in the young adult section, and they have themes like rape, violence, and things like that people object to them being shelved in that area and being available to an audience that they're supposedly unsuited for. And that's kind of a theme that we've heard often. So I'm going to read a passage. Watchmen is about a group of retired superheroes, and in the story, superheroes were actually commissioned by the government for security reasons, and there's someone who's hunting down some of the retired superheroes and killing them, so they have to figure out who's doing this and come out of retirement eventually. So it's an interesting story. It's a really complex story, and I think that's something that I really underestimated before I started reading comics and graphic novels, was how complex the stories could be. So I'll read my passage. Rorschach's Journal, October 16th, 1985, 42nd Street. Women's breasts draped across every billboard, every display, littering the sidewalk. Was offered Swedish love and French love, but not American love. American love, like Coke and green glass bottles, they don't make it anymore. Thought about Moloch's story on Way to Cemetery. Could all be lies. Could all be part of revenge scheme planned during his decade behind bars. But if true, then what? Puzzling reference to an island, also to Dr. Manhattan. Might he be at risk in some way? So many questions. Never mind. Answers soon. Nothing is insoluble. Nothing is hopeless. Not while there's life. In the cemetery, all the white crosses stood in rows, neat chalk marks on a giant scorecard. Paid last respects quietly, without fuss. Edward Morgan Blake, born 1924, 45 years a comedian, died 1985, buried in the rain. Is that what happens to us? A life of conflict with no time for friends, so that when it's done, only our enemies leave roses. Violent lives ending violently, Dollar Bill, The Silhouette, Captain Metropolis. We never die in bed. Not allowed. Something in our personalities, perhaps? Some animal urge to fight and struggle, making us what we are? Unimportant. We do what we have to do. Others bury their heads between the swollen teats of indulgence and gratification, piglets squirming beneath a sow for shelter. But there is no shelter. And the future is bearing down like an express train. Blake understood. Treated it like a joke, but he understood. He saw the cracks in society, saw the little men in masks, trying to hold it together. He saw the true face of the 20th century and chose to become a reflection, a parody of it. No one else saw the joke. That's why he was lonely. Heard joke once. Man goes to doctor, says he's depressed, says life seems harsh and cruel, says he feels all alone in a threatening world, where what lies ahead is vague and uncertain. Doctor says treatment is simple. Great clown Pagliacci is in town tonight. Go and see him. That should pick you up. Man bursts into tears. Says, but doctor, I am Pagliacci. Good joke. Everybody laugh. Roll on snare drum. Curtain. And that ends my passage.
Thank you, Madeline. And as you could see, I went ahead and I just put a panel so you could see the style of the Watchmen here. And then also she mentioned the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, and they have a whole page on banned comics and information as to the problem, why they're banned, which ones are banned and why, and what people can do to help and how the CBLDF helps. So I thought I would just put that up there for you guys so you could take a quick look. And also, I wanted to put up here that the Watchmen, I'm sure a lot of you guys know, the Watchmen is also a movie. And it came out a couple of years ago, and it got 7.6 out of 10 at IMDb, and 56% at Metacritic. And so a lot of people thought the people that didn't like it, I recall they thought it didn't go far enough like the comic books did. The comic books are very, they're out there. Moore is pretty known for being, just very in your face about things. But again, if you ever get a chance to read it or see it, go right ahead. So Anyone have a question for Madeline? And so, Madeline, I guess we're going to get right to that question that everybody is asked. Do you think the censorship or the concerns and problems, do you think they're justified?
Actually, from what I've read of this, like I said, I haven't actually finished it yet, but I already really like it. It gets stuck in my head, but not in a bad way. It's very complex, and it questions a lot about what you think about society, and it kind of addresses a lot of the issues with other comic books, like the character of the anti-hero and things like that. And it's actually not as violent as some of Moore's other works, so I just don't think that it really warrants. Like I said, it hasn't been successfully banned anywhere, and I think that they would have a lot of trouble pulling that off because there's really not. I don't think that it's. I don't know. I just don't see the. I just don't think that it's really as yeah. I don't think that it's really as founded as it should be.
So it's not as deep as all that. So
it's definitely deep, but I just don't think that the issues are really.
Well, that's what I meant. The issues. The issues are not so extreme as people think.
Right.
Okay. Somebody did have a question. Go ahead, Brooke.
So what age group would you say that, I mean, just from your personal opinion, of course, that this is an appropriate work for? Because, like you was mentioned, it was, most, or at least when graphic novels first really started hitting the scene, they were being, placed in the young adult section. But what is, after or reading part of this or reading a good portion of this, what is your opinion on where they belong?
I really think that this would be great in high school. I would have loved to have read something like this in high school, and I don't know why I didn't pick it up, because I was really into other literature that had the character of the anti-hero and made me question who are the real good guys, who are the real bad guys, and see both sides of everyone, see the dark side in lots of people. So I think it stands along with like Hamlet is something that comes to mind that we've already mentioned. I think it stands with things like that that would be really a great addition for like a high school age group. And those are the schools that it came under fire at, was at some high schools, but I think it definitely belongs there.
And just kind of piggybacking on that, I was just saying anti-heroes seem to be more common now because they're more complex. In the past, before the country kind of wholesale started getting rid of comic books, which used to be a huge industry in this country at the beginning of the last century, they were a lot more complex, and we had a large genre. But now it just seems like what we're looking at now is more gray characters, more complex characters that aren't, all good, the Boy Scout like Superman, or, all bad like the Joker. They're kind of starting to be more modeled after Batman, who is a hero, but he has a very dark side, or even like the Punisher, where, the Punisher is an anti-hero. He's not a hero. He kills people, but he kills mobsters. Kind of like Dexter. Dexter is an anti-hero. For those of you who know Dexter, he kills other serial killers. So is he a bad person for killing other serial killers? I don't know. I don't know. So any other questions before we wrap up for tonight? I know we ran long, and like I said, it's because we started a little bit late, so I apologize for that. Any more questions? Okay, so and again, while I had one of the reasons why I had Madeline go last was because she was doing a graphic novel, but also she's going to let you know about an upcoming guest who's going to talk about comics. Go right ahead, Madeline.
Hi, we have an event going on next Tuesday.
Uh-oh, can you talk up just a little bit?
I'm sorry. Sorry. We have an event going on next Tuesday, and we are hosting Dr. Carol Tilley, and she's a member of the faculty at the University of Illinois. She teaches in the GSLIS there, and she is a scholar and a librarian and an educator, and she's done a lot of research and published works dealing with the history of comics and also youth librarianship in libraries. And she's done some noted research about Frederick Wortham, whose impact stigmatized comics in the public opinion and really had some devastating effects on the comics industry and their availability in libraries. And she's just a really fascinating, remarkable figure in our field, and we're really excited about this event and her willingness to share her knowledge with us. And she's going to cover the topics of comics readers advisory, youth services librarianship, and media literacy. And it's next Tuesday, September the 30th at 6 o'clock Pacific time, and it's in this same room, the ALASC Collaborate room. So hope you'll attend and share it with your friends.
And we will be sending out a notice to let you guys know and to, give you the link so you don't have to search around or try to find us again. So, like I said, we just wanted to let you know about, one of our upcoming events. And also, since we're on the subject of comics, next month, now that's next week, so that's next Tuesday. In October, we're going to be presenting Dr. Charles Hatfield. He's an associate professor of English at Cal State University Northridge, and he's one of the foremost authorities on comic books and graphic novels, especially as academic works and comparative literature. So he specializes in word and image studies, comics and graphic novels, children's culture, cultural studies, film and media, and popular genres. He's the author of the Eisner Award-winning book, Hand of Fire, the comic art of Jack Kirby, who is huge in the comic book industry. That came out in 2011. Plus, he also wrote Alternative Comics and Emerging Literature, and he was one of the authors of The Superhero Reader. So he'll be coming in October, and again, we're going to let you know about it. So unfortunately,
Hi, Lori. Oh, she's got lag indicator next to the microphone. And now she's dropped out. Madeline, do you want to take over and wrap things up?
Sure. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming. This has been really interesting, and I appreciate your willingness to share with us. And I've definitely heard about some great books that I'll have to pick up again, like Catcher in the Rye. I loved that one, and maybe I'll pick it up again. And also some new books to read. The Bluest Eye definitely is going to be on my list. And I just really appreciate you all coming out, and we hope to see you at the next ALASC event.